Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theater,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Hello and welcome to MOTSterpiece Theater. We're all giving this 10s, right?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm still going to ask.
So I'm not going to...
I don't know. Mine might have
What are
gone
we
up to
giving
11.
What movie are we giving it a 10 to?
I'm going to toss this pen away because I'm not going to need it.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, we're doing tonight The Godfather, number 2 on the AFI Top 100 list. I actually found an interesting fact is the reason you thought that Casablanca was number 2...
Point of order before we start. It's not Godfather 2, which it almost sounded like you meant.
He said
Number
Godfather.
The Godfather,
number
the first
two,
one.
Number
It
2
is
on the
number two
AFI,
on the
The
AFI.
Godfather.
They actually
They
switched
switched
it.
it.
So
They change up the ranking.
Well, so wait, what? Never mind. Go on.
anyway, so we're reviewing The Godfather, which has been really reviewed to death and analyzed to death, and we're about to beat a dead horse.
So get ready for more.
No,
Or we're
gonna
about to do
revive-
something with a dead
We're going
horse.
to revive this horse because our analysis, of course, is the one that you cannot refuse.
I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Thurlow,
Hello there.
Chris Morgan,
Good evening.
and Stephen Ramosi.
Hey,
Hey,
All right, so we'll start off. What do you give me the funny log line?
Well, the best I can come up with, I can't top The Godfather, but I'll just make a reference to us. Don't you ever ask us about our podcasting business. There's one time I'll let you.
So I'm going to give the intro body conclusion very briefly because I don't really need to tell the plot to this. You've seen the movie.
Assuming you have.
And if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen the mythology that has
Culture
created
osmosis,
this.
you might have seen 80% of it, even if you haven't
Yeah,
seen
but
the movie.
even if you
itself.
go back to Shakespeare or to ancient Greek myths, it's all there.
True.
The third son in a crime family, he goes off to war,
Or even
and
Dynasty.
yeah, a dynasty is a good way of saying that. Goes off to war to create an identity of his own. A war between the families breaks out, and he is slowly drawn back in to the crime life until he becomes his father.
The Godfather.
Actually, he's drawn in. He was never really. He was kind of on the periphery of
Yeah,
it.
that's what I say.
he tried to escape. They kept bringing him back in as the line
Etc.
goes.
Yeah.
So, as I was saying, that's really the synopsis of it. You can go into all the little details there, but that's the main plot line. And it's really a very, mythologically heavy plot line. With the idea of, you have Don Corleone, which is a noble title matched with Lionheart, which again has that steeped in mythology. You have the whole of the family
Symbolic.
invested in there, and you have the kind of a young man having to take his father's place in war. And this is one of the best character studies I have ever seen,
Indeed.
detailing the progression of Michael Corleone's either rise or fall, depending on how you want to look at it. And I'm going to say it straight off, this is a near perfect movie. Upon watching it now, you can notice a little bit of cracks in the a couple of if you're overanalyzing it, you can look at different
You can nitpick it.
There's
Independent
tiny.
things.
The one thing is, I've seen this all my life. I've watched this movie. I've seen it dozens of times, and I never noticed little I noticed every continuity glitch, with the wine,
Sure.
and it's just
That's nothing to do with the narrative. That's
no.
just-
I'm just saying it's so
Thematic.
funny that
but the narrative is timeless, and
Yes.
and even though just as The Sopranos and Goodfellas wouldn't exist without this wouldn't exist without all of the tradition that came before it. But it's not just a retelling; it's a innovation to this this theme, this mythology.
It's an
it's
elevation.
it's almost to the idea of storytelling, kind of what I hesitate to say this, but what Citizen Kane was to filmmaking, right?
I don't necessarily disagree.
This whole different way of doing something, this whole different way of making a film,
Presenting it, yes.
and it kind of just reinvented a lot of things about filmmaking that there's a lot of stuff about this movie you're never going to see before the movie. I mean, granted, certainly it borrows from
That's true.
previous stuff.
No, you're right.
But there's things that this movie did that were never seen before that, and were seen constantly afterwards.
To your point, and I'm going to jump briefly ahead to Godfather 2, is they really do at one point draw in the structure from like the Roman Empire, like how things were done. So, I mean, while they didn't really call attention to it, I mean, there's a
connection there. Sure.
There's definitely a connection there.
The thing is, if you replaced a mob like the Syndicate with noble families taking place in Venice,
with the Medicis or
Florence,
whatever.
yeah, Medicis. That's a perfect example. The
Same
narrative
kind of
structure is exactly what a great Shakespeare play is. Like
Yeah.
And all of those. Again, when we get to themes, we'll discuss a lot of what goes to this, but it is that classic narrative structure there, and I can't like. But also, I don't know, done in a spectacularly new fashion. I know the anti-hero had been done prior to this, but they had really done like for this particular type of
Here
tale.
and there, but this one solidified it.
Yeah, it had a person. You watch this person fall, or again rise, depending on how you want to take it.
Right.
I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right, and I'm giving it a 3. I think we all are giving Intro Body Conclusion collectively a 3. There's pretty much no question. The only thing, we had a brief conversation prior to the cast, and if you check out our Hulk screenwriting episode, where we decided that Godfather is indeed way more than 3 acts, and that's fucking perfect. It's seamless in that sense. You cannot cut up the Godfather into 3 acts. You shouldn't, and I think it's one of the, as you said, an early-ish story, or at least in terms of filmmaking, and wherein it did that. It broke the mold to do that kind of thing.
And
amongst many other things it had done.
I think it's fortuitous that we are doing our first episode about movies, where we're just combining Intro, Body, Conclusion all into one thing, because you're right, for this movie, it doesn't really make as much sense as for a lot of things. It's not a 3-act movie.
Exactly.
There are more than 3 acts in this movie, and I think kind of getting through the whole plot at once will help us, is going to help us keep everything kind of stable and a little bit hold together better. What I want to kind of say about the plotline of this is that it's incredibly well crafted, the way that it goes through. And we were talking about it during the movie, where a couple times I jokingly said, like, oh, that was a long time shift. But you never really felt like a lot of time passed in between. No. Or if it did feel like a lot of time passed, it was
clear.
perfectly clear that had happened.
Exactly.
And on the first beat of the scene, you knew basically
Where you were.
how much time had passed.
One of the things I find interesting, and I've seen this movie dozens of times, is that it's amazing to me that the wedding scene, Connie and Carla's wedding, takes up literally the first half hour of the movie. And I'm always... It's simultaneously, I'm surprised that it's not longer. At the same time, I'm like, I can't believe it didn't feel a half an hour.
It feels exactly as long as it should be, because it's brilliantly put together.
Now, granted, I've seen this movie countless times, so I know who all the actors or the characters in this are.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's as clear to who everyone is if you hadn't seen it all, but they do introduce all the major players and their personalities very well in showing, not telling.
Yes.
And with the time frame aspect, they also do a great thing of they'll mark time by pregnancy or birth of a character. Oh, I have
children.
Yeah, 3 children have been born since this last event happened, or we'll mark it with illness and death as well, and that birth death.
But no, I was going to say, you brought up a good point. I was thinking about that, and it cannot be understated about the wedding scene, how everything you need to know is there in that half hour. Like you said, show, don't tell, perfect proportion, pretty much everything's set up, everything's got to pay off. I mean, even you see Bartzini there.
Mm-hmm.
You're introduced to Luca Brasi.
Everybody. Yes.
It's just the attention to detail for that first half hour. I'm not saying the rest of it doesn't have attention to detail, but there is so much baggage that wedding has to carry.
Mm-hmm.
It's just...
I'm unfolding real quick, Steve. I'm unfolding a lot of that into style.
Yeah.
We'll talk about later, but
yeah,
I don't have much more to say about the intro. Body
I mean,
conclusion.
you're right. You're right about that, Chris. The opening scene with the wedding does a lot of work a lot of like plot work,
and almost like effortlessly.
And it does. I mean, it's just so good. Like everything, you understand who these characters are right in the beginning. I will say this: this is my first time seeing this movie, unlike everyone else here. All the way through, at least I've seen bits and pieces of it, and of course I know a bunch about it just through
cultural osmosis.
Yeah,
sure.
But as far as the quality of the movie, and we actually watched this with our buddy Rich, who you may remember from other podcasts.
Rich Perry, regular guest on the
and he said this. He said the exact same thing. Where like I wasn't sure if this was going to hold up. Like having seen it 33 years on in life, like I wasn't sure if this was going to hold up to how much hype everybody gave it, but I think it kind of does. It's a very, very good movie. It's a very good movie, and it has the emotional fortitude to like stand up to all of that, to everything that everybody says.
Yeah, like that phrase. I can't really say much more.
I was going to say we're probably going to come back to this with style, but something just occurred to me that Steve-O said, like when you get to the ending, and I think this. Watching Steve-O and Rich's reactions to where we all said the last 20 minutes of this movie you have to watch, and the last scene between Michael and Diane Keaton, Kay, is like you've got to watch. This is the greatest scene, and the way they're talking, and all of a sudden she walks out of the room and the door closes behind her, and you just see her. It's like this. The movie began in this house, full of life, everybody there. The movie ends where they're packing up,
right.
Connie's, I mean, it's just like the juxtaposition where like, here's the new Don, and the first Don was not because the old Don ran his business and he was able to run his family, and he's got, all this, he's got all of his life around him, and Michael, and it kind of sets up for the one is like, he's basically has nothing left, or not nothing, but doesn't have.
Sure. It's more empty than it was.
Yeah.
The world of his father is gone and will never reappear again.
And that's one thing they kept saying throughout the movie is just like, the Don's clinging to the old ways.
That's a running theme, which I will get to soon.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to...
In fact, we can dissect a lot of the scenes of this movie, but that's not kind of what we do here. We talk about character studies and themes. So let's move on to themes with Scott.
All right. Well, that's one of them. I guess a good segue. So yeah, sort of... the thing is, this movie is very... thematically intense, I'll say, substantial, meaty. There is so much you can get out of it, and especially if you've been following or have heard in any way, shape, or form about Joseph Campbell's Hero 1,000 Faces, I think this is a great movie to sort of tie in or at least reference to that, because you said, if you remove like the details of it, it's a noble family, a aristocratic family, and their struggles, and their like attempts to remain in power, remain who they are, remain respected, and have their business, whatever it may be. Sure, in this case, Sicilian Mafia. But, I mean, that's sort of like almost, not ancillary, but it's just a great character study, as you said, of the dynamics of all of that, of running a dynasty and having enemies that are against, that frenemies sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, regardless of whatever situation you may be in, like you said, or I said, both of us, the Medici situation, anything like that. And of course, then it's the anti-hero arc, if you will, of Michael's reluctant call to adventure, but then him embracing all that, and him becoming his father, he replaces his family's lifelong consigliere, which we'll get into in secondary, their advisor, with his own father, as his father is semi-retired because he's survived an assassination attempt. All these things. There are so many elements that mesh together so incredibly well, which any one of them could be its own theme in any other movie. This movie's like, nah. Coppola's like, we'll take on like 6 very substantial themes and have them all tied together. Family duty, family honor, all of that stuff is all here, interwoven perfectly throughout. And you can see them as the characters change, their allegiances to each one of those things kind of change, and the themes sort of like bob and weave, if you will, like go up and down. Like now they're addressing this theme, and now another one's coming up, so that one sort of like falls down, but then they come back together. It's just so incredibly perfectly put together in a very seamless and streamlined way. And to your point, Steve, that you were mentioning earlier about the time jumps, like even that, like you notice it, but like you don't question it. Like,
Yeah.
here's the evolution of their family. Now this character's, Michael's doing this now. Now he's reluctant. His father, Vito, never wanted him to do this. All that stuff. It's reluctant, taking up the mantle of what your family represents, and all the ties and all the duties that come along with it, and the tough choices that you have to make in all those situations.
Well, actually, to build off of what you said, in kind of an interesting reversal, while strapping on the skin of the mafia onto this like mythological
Framework.
we'll
say, yeah.
it also mythologized mobsters.
Exactly. I was sort of leaving that one for you.
It moved from, in a sense, the kind of Chicago era gangster style to the idea of like the nobility inherent, the honor amongst thieves, and the idea of like family respect. And we don't like in here they stress a lot of things about like we don't hurt civilians. Like, oh, they know you're a civilian, so you're safe to go in this situation.
Yeah, you're a good mediator.
And the kind of the like they angst quite a bit over killing of a cop. Like, is that against that's against the rules of the rules of crime? And it's such an interesting like portrayal, and it has influenced a lot of movies that came after it.
Well, not only that, but like I think a really big thing that is in a lot of movies and TV shows that came afterwards was the reticence to sell drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at
good point.
Almost any like gangster, mobster, whatever movie, TV show, whatever. I mean, one of the most recent ones that I can think of off the top of my head was Sons of Anarchy. Had kind of the same arc, even though that show turned
because
into
the Godfather existed before
that show turned into like a fucking mess. But like, yeah, exactly. Since the Godfather, it's been like, oh, if you're a serious mobster family, if you're a serious gangster family, if you're a serious crime family, you don't sell drugs.
Yeah, I mean, they had
That's
standards
not part
even
of,
though they're like
yeah.
engaged in
And,
crime.
like if you look at like Goodfellas, it's drugs that was the downfall.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So there's
and it always is.
Well, the cool thing is it's pragmatic because it's just like, we've got these lawyers and politicians in our pockets, and that's a line you can't cross. It's just like, you've got these harmless vices, gambling, prostitution, victimless crime, so to speak. No, but when you have, but drugs somehow crosses a line.
Well, it's more insidious, and like you can see, like again, like even generational conflict, you could say is a theme I could like throw into this blender of great themes that they address.
Yeah.
Of course.
And that actually another great theme I love in here, and it's very famous for the imagery of the orange being the symbol of death for Vito, but the idea of death in this, because it starts out with a man asking the Don to kill
for justice,
people.
but he means murder.
Yeah, and Don Corleone says, "No, I'm not going to kill these men because it's not one for one thing. Like they abused your daughter, they didn't kill her, so taking their life would be dishonorable in a way." And then as you go along, and that generational breakdown when it becomes the order is lost and the chaos comes in. When Michael's on the run, his bodyguards and like you'll see it a lot in this movie of different characters are constantly flanked by bodyguards.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's most profound with the open carrying of like shotguns in Italy, but like they're ever present in like either in front of the foreground of the scene, in the background.
No matter what, they are there.
Somehow that life is very tenuous in this world. Yeah. And I brought up this theme again too, but I always really like it as one where people like controlled chaos. They like to think that there is order to the terrible things that happen around them. That's why people are drawn to the idea of not just the glamour of like mobsters, but the idea is that we want our thieves, we want our people killing other people to have a code. To decide no drugs will allow the more harmless vices, if you so will. And like I think that's what really draws people to these kind of works. So saying like
it's a compelling thing.
There's order to the chaos.
Yeah, no, I agree. Another one you can throw in again. And as I said before you go on, Chris, my final thoughts on themes is I'm obviously giving it the hardest of all ones because any of these are significant enough that one movie can address them. And this movie addresses like 7 of them, we'll say, all of which are very well addressed and are seamlessly interwoven into the plot of the character study and the mythological world building as well.
This movie is just short of 3 hours, and I still can't believe how much crap they packed into this. But no, but I was thinking about in terms of retribution, let's say, because even when it comes to Sonny and so forth, when the Don comes back, he said, "I don't want any retribution." He makes the peace, but then he's talking in strategy to Michael and Tom, and then he puts Tom out of the loop that Vito becomes consigliere for Michael because they want Tom's hands clean because all of a sudden now, Vito knows what's going to happen after his death. He knows that they're planning retribution, that,
Sure.
Michael's got to settle the score. And this is something he didn't want, but it's now a necessity in order to move on and get the family clean, so to speak. Tom's got to get out of it. He's got to stay legit as a lawyer, or as legit as he can. And then they have to do this one final wrong.
Sure.
And Vito and Michael are keeping it very close to their chests. And that's why I also said with the wine drinking scene, to pay attention to it. So great because he's sitting there, Vito's sitting there talking about strategy. And then he says, "How's your family?" And, Michael says, his kid's reading the funny papers. He's like, "Oh, funny papers." And then he goes from smiling and "Oh yeah, there's this one thing." And Michael's like, "All right, you already said that, Pop." I mean, it's just it's like you see the conflict with Vito that he's going in and out of this. And it kind of looks like dementia away, but it's also like
he's just reluctant.
He's reluctant. But yeah, I mean, so it's a really just amazing, all little details, how all these things are addressed. And I'm flabbergasted every time I see it.
Still impactful.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say. The themes of this movie are incredible, and it goes through a lot. It says a lot
about a
not
lot.
only about mob life or whatever. Like there have been a ton of movies that do that, but about just the human condition and people in general, and
exactly.
And we've mentioned a lot of it already, but that's kind of what this film does, and
does so fucking well.
Obviously, I'm going to give it a 1. I think everyone else is too.
Yes.
All right, Chris, on to you with antagonist.
Crime.
He was going to say,
drugs.
Fate.
Fate.
No, because I was thinking about this because it's like Vito loses his teeth. Like he did what he had to do to get where he was, but he always put his family first. He said in that wine drinking scene, "I'm not going to apologize for all the things I did because I put my family first." And when we get to Godfather 2 and we see Vito's background, you see.
All right.
No, hold on.
No spoilers. I haven't seen the second one.
Right, but that's not really a spoiler because it's.
Don't fuck me up, Chris.
All right. Fungal.
Yes.
No, but
let's focus on Godfather 1.
But the thing is, with Michael, it's like Michael goes from being on the outside to immediately stepping in, knowing what to do, and it's kind of hard to. It's like Sollozzo is the initial catalyst. I mean, there's this truce between the 5 families. But Sollozzo comes in, the Turk, and introduces the drugs thing. But Barzini's behind the whole thing. He's behind Tatalia and all that
the
stuff.
puppet master, if you will.
So in a way, he can be the antagonist. He's a silent antagonist. But it's really hard for me now that we've been discussing themes and the plot, not to see that in a lot of ways it's kind of like there's a fatalistic thing about this. So yeah, if you're going to talk physically, I'm going to say, if you're going to talk about a tangible, as Steve-O likes, he likes a tangible presence,
corporeal thing.
Then I'll say Barzini, and I'll say he's outstanding. But I'll say for Scott and I, where we're intangible, I think the fate, destiny.
Well, actually, I'm going to back you up here.
All right,
because I made me remember something about Clemenza. When they're going into the very famous scene where Michael transitions from a civilian to
Sicilian,
Sicilian. And Clemenza is talking to him like, "Oh, these wars need to happen every so often to clean out." But that kind of fatalistic mentality of like eventually
They know it's
It
coming.
gets rid of the
during
bad
wartime
blood.
is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so like you're absolutely right that this is just the cyclical nature of things.
And what's also as funny is that Michael was a soldier in World War II, so he came back
I was
from the
waiting to bring
war.
that up at the next question. but
Sorry,
certainly
buddy.
that's pertinent. No, don't get me wrong. That's a very important aspect because of, again, all the mythological framework, as we said. So if I'm going to comment on antagonists very quickly, I like the fatalistic aspect for sure, and that speech sort of solidifies that, sort of like brings it to the forefront, and that, yes, if you're in this life, and even if not, like, life will just force you perhaps sometimes to do things you might not otherwise that you wanted to do or your loved ones wanted you to do, but nevertheless, here you are having to choose to do them and do them in a certain way. So yeah, I think, if not fate, I guess like the happenstance of life forces itself upon you regardless of it, and that's a great antagonist.
But I was noticing something about the Clemenza scene, about the thing with his dad, the wine drinking scene, is that Clemenza goes, he's explaining to him, like, about shooting the guy and the gun, and like, these things have to be every 5-10 years. And then like, he's just like, Mikey, I want you to know we're all proud of you, what you did with the war. There's always somebody, whether it's Vito at the end, at some point saying that, hey, we're proud of you for what you did outside this life. I never wanted this for you. I mean, there's this whole thing, like, on the one hand, except for Vito, part of them are like, okay, Mikey, we're embracing you coming in here. But on the same time, it's just like,
But that's also sort of tied into themes. So
I think I have the perfect antagonist.
Go ahead, buddy.
Business. It's always business.
Capitalism.
That fucks everything up.
I want to do you one more with Hitler, because if Mikey had never had to go off to war,
That's true.
that the whole situation could have been changed.
but wait, didn't Clemenza say, like, if somebody, who is it who
He
said
they got him in Munich.
yeah, if they got him in Munich.
But I think that's not yes, time frame wise, but I think that the idea that he was a soldier fighting this war and then having to return home and fight a different war was not a coincidence.
Sure, of course it's there for a reason, and I think it ties in.
But I will say, like, this idea of like keeping the business going is a large part of why everything in this movie
I don't
happens.
disagree.
Like, and that's what they're always chased by, like the idea that they have to keep the business going. You can't take anything too personally. And
You're right.
Granted, when people take things personally, they die.
Well, that's what I find funny in a lot of things is this is like a lot of people like, this wasn't personal, whatever.
It's its own vicious cycle.
But the thing is, in most narrative, you're like, this wasn't personal. It's like, it doesn't really fucking matter. In this world, the way it's constructed, where you say, they don't say it's not personal, they say it's business.
It's business.
Yeah. That's excellent.
You're right, Steve. I mean, I agree with all that. I can combine them both into antagonists, if you will.
Who's the capo that betrays them at the end?
Oh, Sally? Tessio?
Tessio. He's the only one I actually believed when he said
it's business.
It's business, not personal.
Yeah.
I
think like 5 different characters say it throughout this movie.
I don't know. It is.
Well, Barzini and Tatalia, those guys, definitely not Sarasa.
I'll take the Turk at first. Like, he's trying to, before we move on, my last thought is, encapsulating all of this, is he's trying to explain to Don Corleone, to Vito, that, listen, the times are changing. We have to get into the drug business. Vito is reluctant because he has holding on to a semblance of old school honor, old school respect. We don't mess around with drugs. I don't like the drugs, right? But that in order to advance their business, they're going to have to do it eventually. So that causes the first schism, if you will. And Steve, it only becomes like a vicious cycle afterwards. So I agree. Like,
because of business.
Yes, exactly.
But they choose casinos, and living in New Jersey, I see how well Atlantic City's doing.
Yeah, that's true.
Sure, I suppose. But I mean,
it's 50 years on now.
Regardless, similar to themes, is all I'm saying. My closing thought is that there are many antagonists that you can sort of mold into one, and all of them are very, very effective.
Yes, I agree. And so, Stephen, on to you with protagonists.
What is a protagonist in this movie? Really?
Business.
Michael, Don Corleone, Michael Corleone. Sure, they are the
face of the protagonist.
People that we follow. I guess you could call them anti-heroes. I don't even think they're that. Honestly, they're straight up villains that are made into protagonists.
Villain protagonist.
I would say that, first of all, I would say that Don Corleone, both of them, are the. But I would say that actually Don Corleone, yeah, he's a bad dude. Is actually though a.
But is he a bad enough
individual.
dude to save the president's daughter?
Probably not. But Michael definitely is a villain. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the entire thing, and like it's this whole brilliant story arc of turning a good like war hero into a
decent man
into a villain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of why it's an awesome movie, and that's kind of why everybody loves this movie so much. Because it's not your standard like good guy wins out in the end. It's the good guy turns into bad guy, and that's why he wins out in the end.
Exactly, and that's why this movie is so famous and so fucking good, because you might have seen it before this, but I mean, again, it's codified that sort of thing where, this guy's, he's like the good old boy, back from World War II, and he'll definitely set things straight. Oh, now he's
shit.
He's ordering hits. He's performing hits himself. Like,
yeah.
You see his whole character arc, his like dark hero's call, almost, if you will, and that's why it's so impactful and so important.
The entire reason why Tony Soprano exists.
Exactly, exactly. You can trace it all back to that. Like, audiences, I would bet, had never seen it. You tell me, Chris, you probably saw it in theaters when it came out.
No, I didn't. I was only 2 at the time, so
whatever.
And
all I'm saying is, like, you can trace the lineage back. Like you said, like, villain protagonist itself is a trope unto itself.
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
because of this movie.
Maybe because of this movie.
Exactly. So, go on.
I don't want to cut you off. I was just like thinking about that it's a tragedy, but like it's Michael's tragedy, but Michael's like the only one who doesn't see it as a tragedy. Everybody else sees that it's
that's kind of pretty good.
Except his wife.
I mean, it's just like everybody's just like like I said before, we wanted better for you. We were all proud of you, and Michael's just kind of like jumping into this. Like at the beginning, he tells Kay, that's my family, that's not me, and at the end.
He is his family.
It's him.
We all become our father in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh Christ, no, not me.
You fight with your father figure and become.
That's good. We'll talk about your father later, Chris.
No, we're not.
But anyway, are we done with the protagonists?
One's all around.
But I'm giving it a 1 for sure.
So secondary, there are a plethora of secondary characters to talk about.
A cornucopia.
Let's do the tradition.
Oh, the pick one of your favorite. All right, I'll go last then. And so Scott.
I don't remember anybody's name. I'm gonna be fucked.
Well, I'll tell you. All right, you
just
tell me
describe
who it is. I'm gonna tell mine because I remember it. Clemenza is probably my favorite because the way he's set up, and he set up again, as you said, everyone set up in the wedding, and throughout the movie, he's the one who teaches Michael like he's gonna plant the gun. He tells Michael what to do and what's gonna happen afterwards and how to get out of there. Right? You almost like Coppola does a very good job and Puzo as well of like. Maybe implanting in mind, like he's the traitor, like he's sort of like double agenting, but he's not. He's the most loyal motherfucker in the world to them. Maybe aside from Tom,
which is funny because at the end he's the one who asks like about him and Tessio getting their own families.
Yeah.
But it was Tom Hagen even who said, "I thought Clemenza would be the one to."
Exactly. They even like almost lampshade it itself in the film. So like he's competent and he's sort of like almost he could be a comical. He's he's standing like kind of big. That mafia guy, he's gonna leave the gun, take the cannoli, that famous line.
But he's actually a mythological archetype too, of like the portly, jovial one.
He's like his spiritual guidance, almost in a certain sense. So like, I just think the screen time that I'm sorry, I don't remember many of the actors' names. Definitely not that one. So Clemenza, the character,
whoever that guy was,
is my certain favorite because of that fact, and because he also like performs a very necessary task at the end as well. He comes back and performs like one of the final murders, and he's competent the whole time, and he's loyal to him, and. That's my favorite one. They're all getting a 1 for sure. Like you said, there's a plethora of like 15
all right,
you could
Chris,
talk about.
Tell us a story about your favorite.
You go ahead. If it ain't Clemenza.
Other than Clemenza.
Hello, Scott Thurlow. I want to thank you for saying my favorite character on the day of this podcast. So I have to go with Luca Brasi because he is just.
What the hell, man?
Sorry, dude.
Everybody's taking the one before them's favorite.
That's the way things are.
I love the way his face turned red when he got strangled by the piano wire.
Yeah. You're right. A perfect job. Great character. And the thing is, his own mythology, Michael tells a story of Luca was the one who was the muscle, essentially, when Vito was doing non-refusal deals, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, in the novel, they actually...
Yes, well, I thought we agreed to not bring any novel aspects in. But anyways.
So,
sure.
Steve-O, your favorite?
You can take both of those. Still.
All right, I choose both of them. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, you
other
can't
than
choose both of them. Just
I
talk about a
another good
different
one.
one.
I love fucking Tom.
You love fucking Tom?
I love fucking Tom.
See, Tom Hanks was almost going to be my pick as well.
I was
debating.
I picked Tom. I choose Tom,
And that's a
He
really
was
good
great.
pick.
He was great throughout. Duvall, amazing portrayal. He's the one guy whose name I can remember. And on top of that, he did a great job as a consigliere.
Consigliere.
Concierge and
Concierge.
concierge.
Consigliere.
No, there's no G. You don't pronounce the G. It's consigliere.
Fine.
Anyway, he did a great job, and he was. Shut up, Chris.
Go on. Yeah.
But
I certainly agree he was
But no,
amazing.
he did a fantastic job throughout the movie, and it was great to see the dynamic of him being kind of like in the family. He was like a brother to everybody, but he was still outside the. He was kind of the Jon Snow of the family,
Yes.
if you will.
Sure.
He's outside the family because he wasn't born with them, but he was taken into the family very young. That story is told early on.
Yeah, so he knows the inner
And-
workings.
Yeah, he just does a brilliant job in that part. And it's great to see that play out. By the way, before I let you go, Ian, I know we normally don't mention this stuff, but I just noticed that our wrestling man is sitting atop the eraser over there, and that's brilliant.
He's our
Whoever did that, whichever one of you guys
I did it.
that,
'Cause I'm
congratulations.
awesome. Anyways.
Anyway, Ian, tell us a story about
Well,
your supporting
I don't know
character.
who is like you guys hit all the major great sporting cast here. I could say Mo Green because he's such a dick.
Yeah.
Immediately such a dick.
All right, go on.
But he's a villain in a way. But not,
That's
you could
second.
have the
Minor
producer.
villain.
You could have the producer who has the horse head.
I was
and the
debating
van.
about that one too.
But it's such a minor character. I guess I'm stuck with Fredo.
I knew. Not knew, but I
actually was gonna-
Fredo to you.
I was actually going to bring him up. Go on.
That's what everybody's.
Although
They were stuck with Fredo.
not always.
As Saul said,
Corleone's give Fredo a 0.
Yeah, Fredo is such a heel. Like, I mean, he's well intentioned, but he's just a doofus.
well, at the beginning, he's like the only one member of the family that's drunk at the wedding. Like,
Yeah.
drunk, like he can't
He's the only
even...
one that's left out of all the meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like the runt of them almost. if you will.
I believe, if I can quote this correctly, it's Vito Corleone is like talking about right after Sonny dies. He's like, and Fredo, and he just kind of drifts off without saying anything.
Like
But-
that says so much more than him saying anything
No.
else. But I think, all right, so you're choosing Fredo. I think there's one that none of us mentioned that
Mhm.
Sonny also is an important
Sonny,
character.
yes.
Yeah.
Sonny
That
for
absolutely.
sure.
we got to throw in there.
I actually, if you mind, I love Sonny as a character because he has such a inherent flaw that leads to his death, which is like his
you could draw a
passion,
straight line
his
from how he is to how he
anger.
died.
He's a hot-blooded alpha male type character. Yeah, he's not a great Don. In a sense, I think he'd make a great wartime consigliere.
Sure.
But
But he shouldn't be running things.
yeah,
No, I don't think he would even be a good wartime
No,
consigliere.
Well, he's too hot-headed, man.
Yeah.
He's too hot-headed.
He'd be a good soldier,
yeah,
but
that's
He'd be a good
actually
captain.
good.
I wouldn't even say he'd be a good Matsu. I mean, he couldn't even replace Luca Brasi.
Oh no, well because Luca
He could-
Brasi was
He couldn't replace Clemenza. I mean, he'd just be.
Well, he certainly lived longer than Luca Brasi.
Yeah.
Well, either way, I'm just saying, I think Sonny should be thrown into the
So I guess
top running.
we have Kay and the sister whose name I
Connie.
forget, Connie, which
And her husband.
and I guess
Carlo.
Apolliano
Carlo.
or
Apollo,
Apolliano.
His brief life.
Apollonia.
Yes, his brief life.
Apollonia.
Michael's
Apollonia,
brief
yes.
wife.
But I don't. Kay had a lot less screen time in this than I remembered her having, and I actually think that women aren't portrayed particularly well.
no,
They're
in
portrayed
this.
like shit.
It's a sign of the times for
Yeah.
sure. Like it's.
But I
it's
also think it's a
unfortunate,
sign
but-
of the culture
The
they're
culture,
depicting.
yes.
Yeah.
But so yeah, those are the secondary characters. But aside from the fact that women aren't represented well, like the men are represented very like most of the characters have multiple layers to them, or at least have a fatal flaw which gets them their comeuppance. So I'm giving it a strong one.
No, I mean like
Yeah.
because it's such a big like there are like 20. We'll say if you count like every single person who shows up like reoccurringly, there are many of them. But each one, after maybe having seen them twice in the story, you know exactly who they are, what they represent, what they're like, and what their flaw possibly is going to lead them to. the fate that they will meet.
The funniest thing. Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
So I'm sorry. I mean, so yeah, given that like the movie has to like enfold so many secondary, even like tertiary, but that means they're not the main character. They all add to the world building and to the dynamics of like sort of like the tangential lines to the main characters. Mm-hmm. That it all again comes together. A la themes. The secondary characters also blend together and have this great mix of dynamics throughout and through each other and to the main characters that it's perfectly seamless. That's all I can say.
I was going to say, I got really excited about seeing all the characters come up, but I realized one thing tonight. Sollozzo, I fucking hate him. Like, I'm like, you can not like characters as characters, but you can't, as like people, yes. but you can like them as characters, like sure. Even despicable characters. I'm like looking at
like
Sollozzo,
the corrupt cop sergeant commissioner or whatever. Like,
yeah,
he was
Sterling Hayden, yeah, Cop Jack D. Ripper, but Sollozzo, I just fucking hated.
Sure, but he's a good supporting character.
Oh, he's a great supporting character. But
I'm gonna do a ballsy move and actually give secondary a 0 for the portrayal of women.
Oh wow!
I mean, that's like listen. I don't want to get into this, but I'll just say this one thing. That's a pretentious SJW move, if you will.
Sure. Anyway, Scott.
However, I'm still giving it a 1.
Yeah. I am mad at you about that. I'm still going to give it a 1, but I was actually going to bring that up later on.
Mm-hmm. All right.
At the end.
Scott? It's style. Dialogue.
Leave the gun tight to cannoli. Like, as we mentioned, if you haven't seen this movie, you know of it because of some of the many lines. An offer you can't refuse, all that, like, and because maybe it's been parodied, but when seen in its original context, it is fucking riveting. That's all I can say. It is natural, as Chris likes to say, natural to what's happening. All characters, I believe, will be saying what they're saying, and their interactions and their exchanges with each other, and like some of it is not like outright ha 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 funny, but like it's darkly funny. At least at times, like I don't want my brother coming out with nothing but his dick in his hands, like that. But because of context. His brother might die if, So, yes, I'm giving it a 1. I'm not going to spit out all the famous lines, like you know them if you know them, and if you've seen them. If you don't, you've definitely seen something that referenced them, used them, parroted, rephrased it in some way. But it all works. Again, all blended. Each character says the things I completely believe they would be saying, and it matches their personalities perfectly.
Nothing to add to that. I think it's perfectly said.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's there's not much to be said for this. That if you have seen this movie, you know a lot of the lines from it. If you haven't seen this movie, as I hadn't before tonight, you still know a lot of the lines from it.
And now you might know even more.
It's the dialogue is classic for a reason, and the reason is because it's really, really well written. It was a Puzo Coppola joint script writing production, as we saw in the credits. Yep. I wasn't sure exactly who wrote the script. I know that Puzo wrote the book, but like they co-wrote the script, and it's friggin' incredible. So that's all I have to say.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Saturday. I don't know. I just think that's always so cute.
Well, if no one else has anything on dialogue, Chris, on to style with you.
Holy shit. Like, we've been kind of talking about style the whole time. I think this, and Steve-O I think this is the one where Steve-O kept bringing it up, taking the words out of my mouth, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is amazingly shot. Like, it's just like, the hospital scene, the way it was shot, when Michael comes out there with the baker and he's just like, put up your coat, put your hand in your pocket, like it's, there's a gun. The way that shot, like
it's almost like somewhat noir.
Yeah,
noir-ish.
A very noir aspect to it. I mean, the way Coppola really knows how to shoot a scene. Like, it's not like there's an overall style. Like, there's a style to when he's in Sicily.
The scenes in Italy, yes,
yeah,
exactly.
There's a different. The movie has a different feel for each bit, like the wedding, and then like when you go to like the Corleone house. Before Vito's death, and then when Michael's running things, how sparse everything looks. The colors don't seem as vivid. I mean, he just there are so many little visual aspects to this film, little nuances that I noticed again, and how things are shot. The style is ever changing, and he suits the style to whatever scene, whatever era, because we talked about how there are time jumps. And I just have to say again, the last shot of this, when Kay's like, we both need, after Michael says no, he didn't kill Carlo, Kay walks out to get a drink, and he looks over, she looks behind him, and she sees Clemenza saying Godfather or Don Corleone, and then the door closing, and then you see her. It still gives me, to this day, chills.
Yes, I pretty much don't have much more to add. As you said, every shot is a perfect reflection of what's happening to the plot, and it's amazingly framed, blocked. I know Steve-O was jumping at the bit to talk about something that I'm going to let him talk about. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. It is a perfectly, cinematography-wise, you can't get really much better other than Citizen Kane, which is indeed the only film above the list.
As Scott was referencing, the soundtrack to this movie is incredible. And actually, I'm going to just leave it there and possibly leave a little bit more of that to Ian, because you were mentioning it earlier, Ian, and I don't know if you want to expand upon that. It's just an amazing Italian soundtrack.
The mandolin.
The Manda fucking Lin. But what I do want to mention on top of that is that this movie seems to pay special attention to hallways and doorways. And I think that that's brilliant. And like almost every single shot that I said when we were watching the movie,
I noticed that.
I noticed it. Like almost every single shot that I said, that's a brilliant shot, was in a hallway or through a doorway.
Yep.
And it's not something that you really notice, except for, or
you wouldn't notice it outright,
except for the fact that I noticed it because I said this every single time. I was like, oh shit, these are all hallways and doorways. But like, it has these great long shots down these long hallways, and has these great shots like through doorways, and like right at the end of the movie, which is the shot that Chris was referencing, is the only time in the movie, as far as I can tell, as far as I remember, that the doorway closes on somebody. And it just closes right at the end of the movie, and that's it.
On the woman.
And on that poor woman.
And I close that door.
But yeah, like there's this incredible level of detail, and I have to believe that was completely intentional.
It 100% is intentional.
That there's this big focus on the hallways and doorways, and like and these these portals to wherever you're going or coming from, wherever you're coming from.
Or at least being a voyeur to even.
Yeah.
And in the hospital, I thought it was interesting because when they're moving Vito's bed, he shot it not like you're looking at the ground level, but you're below ground level. You're looking at the top couple stairs, and you're watching them from like kind of under where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing, just the palette, as you were mentioning. So like when it's the night shots, like the noir shots, he's outside the hospital, like it's dark and shadows, and like they're driving in cars, or then you're like bright sunlit, like crisp Sicily. Like it matches, it switches and matches perfectly, as we said, and each one feels fresh and crisp and just amazing to see on screen.
True.
So I'm not much of an art person. I'm more of a narrative analytic type individual. But I have to say, a lot of the visuals in this go to the service of the plot as well, and not in a negative way of like being there.
There's
but
a cohesion to them.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, with the idea of them showing time passing through having like children grow up or something like that at that point. But 2 points. One, the fight scene between Sonny and Carlo was fantastic because it's obviously he's not hitting him.
One punch like misses by inches, which is very obvious. And
there's no ADR or anything.
It's like a foot he misses by it.
And then there's the spinning newspapers at that point, which is so dated now, but it's charming when you watch it in older films.
I mean, there's only 2 uses of the spinning newspaper, but I mean, again, the only thing that used it first was Citizen Kane, so like I don't know what to tell you.
I have to say about that Carlo fight, I think is amazing. I totally forgot about it until we were watching it, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's gonna start throwing garbage pails on him. And then when Carlo's grabbing on the thing, he bites Carlo's hand. I mean, I'm like, this is the most amazing
it's a dirty street fight.
Yeah,
of course.
It's amazing.
But yeah, I can't add anything. It's a phenomenal film, and people have written like scholarly works
treatises on the use of it. Yeah,
so
brilliant.
All right, Steve-O, it's on to you with recommendations.
Oh, do I recommend this movie?
Yeah, you've only seen it.
Is that the question?
Yeah, as the person who's only seen it for the first time tonight, do you recommend it?
Yeah, I recommend it.
Really? You sure?
It's pretty.
Alright.
Second best movie ever.
It's all
pretty
right.
good.
It's all right.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible flick. Everybody should watch it at some point. I finally did. So get off your ass.
Yeah, it's epic in scope. It's epic in length. It's
No, see, that's
Not as epic as Ben-Hur, though.
No.
Thank
before we
God.
go on. Like that's actually one thing that reminded me in style. Yes, it's a 3-hour long movie. It does not feel necessarily 3
No, it
hours long
doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
because it's so well crafted.
Well, we went out for plenty of cigarette breaks.
Sure.
So
Yeah, we cut it up ourselves.
3 max.
Anyways,
nonetheless, I fully recommend this. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's definitely worth watching. And the only problem I have with it, I think, throughout this, the dated features of it, but I still think it's a near perfect movie and deserves to be the number 2 spot, or at least in the top 5 of the best movies of all time.
sure. I mean, that's always going to be like an aspect of like older films. You see like dated things, but nevertheless, like as it stands as a sort of timeless story, I think it is indeed the second. It deserves its spot as number 2 on the AFI list, and I was very. It was very satisfying and enjoyable to see it again, having not seen it in a couple of years. Although this is like my 5th or 6th time, still totally stands. And as we said, Steve-O and Rich Perry, who had seen it for the first time, were like, "Oh, it's gonna be like, nope, it's not overhyped at all. It stands exactly as it stands, and it's still incredible. And if you haven't seen it in a while, check it out again. Remind yourself how fucking great The Godfather is."
And I have to say again one more time, it was a real, and I don't mean this in a patronizing way. It was great to see it with Steve and Rich, because we had said, last scene, everybody sit there and watch it. And as soon as the door shuts, like these guys, having these guys go, whoa, it'd be like, that was amazing. It was just really cool to see that visceral reaction.
Yep.
And I know it's cliche for guys to say it, because a lot of guys say it, but this is definitely one of my,
If something is good, you can't.
yeah. But this is one of my
Follow
favorite films of all time. If it's on, I don't care if there's commercials on, if it's on AMC or whatever. I sit down and fucking watch this thing because I just can't pull away from it. I think it's a near perfect movie as well. I
don't say near perfect. I think it is. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm gonna fucking say it's bloody fucking perfect.
Before we end, Ian, to your point earlier, and the reason that this is not a perfect movie on our scale, I completely agree with you that women are just shitty in this movie. They're just not
shit on constantly.
Yeah, they're just not portrayed well.
They're not
and,
shitty.
and
They're just not given.
I was gonna say, are the
what they
women
should
are
be
shitty,
given.
or are you sexist or what?
No, I'm saying the women in this movie
I understand you don't like the portrayal of it.
are shitty because
But
they're
I
not,
think that's like
because they're not given anything to work
without
with.
going
And,
into
and
a
then
huge
you know what? We don't have to
conversation.
defend it. It doesn't matter. But what I would love to see. I mean, I don't want to get into a whole big thing about it, but what I would love to see is a gender swap version of Godfather.
I bet
The
you could find
Godmother.
Ah, yes.
I bet you could find it.
I had said that this has its roots in history,
Yeah.
and I'm now seeing its roots in ancient Greek theater, because
I meant to bring that
they
up
were
earlier.
surely shitty on women.
I meant to bring that. It's almost like a Roman or Greek
Yeah.
place. You said even before Shakespeare, as you mentioned as well. But sure.
But yes, I
If
think,
there's a fault in this movie, it's that. But I think that's again a sign of the times,
I
not
agree.
necessarily that.
I think all of us are going to recommend it.
Yes.
Perhaps it's a sign of the times or just a sign of that culture.
Yes,
Uh,
kind of what I mean.
but anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm sorry, Ian. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, it's 3 10s and a 9 because I'm an SJW.
I'm gonna give it an 11. My score goes up to 11.
Awesome.
Get out of here. Stop it.
Anyways,
Giving it 9.75 overall, which I think it's fully deserves to be. Again, as we've been gushing over this, especially in recommendation, like it deserves the accolades it gets.
Yeah.
And
I can't wait for Godfather Part 4, Godmother.
The Godmother.
Which
Colon
will-
Godmother.
coming by us by
Sophia Coppola can
Yeah.
direct it.
and to be honest with you, watch the film and watch it again.
That's the Lost Signals follow up to Last Elephant 2, Rise of the Dragon.
But Godmother. All right.
So,
So
you
keep
know,
an eye out for that film
Check that out.
coming from our production company. soon.
All right, let's do that.
All right. Well, I'm Jonathan E. Manzer here with Scott Thilla,
See you next time.
Chris Morgan,
Take it easy.
Steven Hermoso.
Arrivederci.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Join us again next time, won't you?
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.